Hi everyone and welcome back to Haunted Hearsay. I'm Caroline. I'm up here in Donegal and I'm joined with Ben down in Dublin. How are you, Ben?
I'm good. Yeah, we took a few weeks off there, and I had an accident last week. That's the reason. One of the reasons why we weren't recording.
Got a couple of stitches in your
I
hand,
got
didn't you?
5 stitches on my hand, so they're coming out tomorrow. So we figured we better do it tonight. Yeah.
Very. There's more nerves in your hands and feet than anywhere else in your body, so it's a nippy old place to get
It
a
was
cut, as it were.
blood
It's that
bath.
close here. I'm actually steaming up my glasses.
Really?
Very quickly, well, yeah, we have taken a break for the last couple of weeks. There was a lot of sad incidences here this last 2 months, and it just didn't feel right coming on and doing a podcast. But so we have a lot of stories now to catch up with, and one was we're going back to my old favourite, the Crolly Doll Factory in Crolly, in County Donegal, of course. And we've done this before. We've covered this before. I still have to speak to Joe, one of the owners of it, the current owners now. And but it was a person that worked there, a girl that worked there, and she. This is when it was an electronics factory. It wasn't the Crolly Doll Factory. So this is back in the sort of 90s to the noughties. And it was one of those, they were, she had packages in her line that had to go out on a Saturday afternoon, and she was asked to come in to do overtime. Now, it would have been very unusual for her to come in on a Saturday. So she was given a big key to come into the factory to work herself. And she was saying that the key's literally about this size. You know, it's one of these massive old-fashioned locks on the door. And so she came in anyway to the factory and went over to her section, and she's getting the stuff that she'd made the day previous all boxed up because it had to be, go out
That's
that
pretty
day.
fair.
And and she was also asked to get the paperwork done. So she's in and she's gathering, getting all her stuff, like when she's in at 8 o'clock in the morning. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, she looks up and lights to the offices. Now, you have the picture, so you put that up. I only have the one where, before the factory was done up, where
Yeah.
that door that's up in on the second floor.
Yeah, I'll get
That's
that.
where the offices were. Now, we have pictures of the offices, and it's, as you'll see in a minute, it's just of them before it was done up. But they were the original offices, and they were used as offices, and that would have been glass panel at that part. And so the lights went on at 9 o'clock, and she could see movement and she could hear movement. And she thought, all the office staff is in. Maybe this is an important order, and there's something else coming in or something. So she carried on anyway. And about 11:30 in the morning, the guys coming to pick up the order come in. This is, have you any paperwork? And she says, sure, all the office staff are in. Run up, somebody there will do it for you. You know, they'll run it through for you. She says, I've been flat out getting these ready. And they just looked at her and says, what are you talking about? She says, all the office staff are in. Should I can hear them up tramping over and back all morning, the noise of them. And they looked at her and they said, you're the only person in here. And she says, I'm not. She looked at the lights, and she looked up and the lights had gone out and there was nobody in the office. She had been in there herself all morning. And she said, it was actually, she says, you're not even talking a wee bit noisy. She said, it was like a full working day noisy.
Wow, that's
You
it.
know, that mumbling of people talking to each other and walking over and back and the lights on. You're not talking one or two ghosts. She said, there's a full staff up there.
No.
And the weird thing was that even when now the boys got spooked, but she didn't. She said, well, they obviously felt comfortable enough with her to come in and carry on their
Yeah.
ghostly going ons, you know. But yeah, so
That's
it's like anyone I spoke to that's ever had a history of working in that factory all have an experience.
yeah. We must go
No,
to
there's very not many of them. Yeah,
when you're
I can't wait to get. Sorry, I'm sorry. You're coming through broken up there, Ben.
sorry. I was just going to say really quickly, when you're in Dublin next, we must, another place that seems a bit like that would be the Kilmainham jail. It's like just so haunted, and it's,
Yeah.
you can hear it, like there's a lot of audible prisoners. But anyway, sorry,
Well,
Carl.
I mean, I think the next time you're in Donegal, we're going to have to go back over and meet Joe together. I'll arrange. He did say he would have a chat with us, so it'd be good if the two of us are there at the same time. There's a few other people I have I'm hoping to have an opportunity to talk to next week as well that have stories about the Crawley factory. So I mean, I'm yeah, there's a lot of locals here that worked in it, and from what I can gather, a lot of locals have stories about working in it and their experience. So it's very haunted.
Yeah, nice.
And so I'm dying to get back over to do a proper investigation over there and to get the full history on it. And as I say, Joe, one of the current owners, he's got all the documents of things that happened there and who was there. So he knows the whole story. He's the man really to tell it. But I do have another story from the same person that worked there, but I'm going to come back to that. You had a couple of interesting things you've been looking at now over the last few
So
weeks.
one, I watched the documentary, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But then also, I read very quickly about a story in the UK at the moment where a 19-year-old guy, I'll just get his info, Daniel Hussein, he murdered two sisters, I think, with two
That's
best
right. Yeah, I've
friends.
seen that.
Yeah, now his whole thing was that he had a pact with the devil that he signed in
Yeah.
blood. And he signed the pact with the devil in blood, and the agreement was that he had to murder 6 women within 6 months or something. I don't
Was
really
that the whole, they didn't give all that information out on the news now. I've seen some
know.
of it
That's actually
here. They
the
just
first,
show the signature.
that's the first thing I saw. And
Sorry?
that's the first thing I saw. And then after I saw, um, I Googled it, and the information, they didn't mention any of the deal with the devil. But the first thing I saw had the signature and the letter and everything on it. But
It was actually on the news last night. I seen it on the news last night. Those two beautiful girls.
mm,
That mother is a very strong woman that was able to stand and say what she did,
mm-hmm,
considering the darkness
mm-hmm,
that took her two daughters. And that's the only way you could describe somebody
I
I
know.
mean, he seemed quite compos mentis.
That's the thing. That's another thing I meant to say. It's quite important in this. He was assessed by all the psychologists, and they deemed him fit to stand trial. So, um, that's interesting.
We'd like to think people that do things like this, and they say it's because of being influenced or they believe in the devil. We'd like to think that it's only crazy people that would do or believe this, because to normal people, that's really hard to fathom, really hard to understand why you would go there, why you would want to go there. But the unfortunate and sad thing is, in today's society, we are aware that it does go on.
Mm-hmm.
And young people can be influenced, and it's so, instead of ignoring it and pretending it doesn't happen, we do have to actually address it and warn people and warn kids,
Yeah.
that sort of, educate yourself about what it is and about how it can affect you mentally, never mind, physically and
I
spiritually. I
think
mean, even take the spirituality out of it.
when people are at their most vulnerable as well, they might be open to things
Yes,
more.
exactly. It's a very, very dangerous path, and it's not something to be taken lightly, but it is also something that does go on. And I
Yeah.
mean, I was made aware of that back in the 80s, and I was genuinely shocked and surprised when
Mm-hmm.
I heard that it was actually an issue in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
All of Ireland, all 32 counties, not 26 and the other 65, all 32 counties, there was a problem with it. And that was a priest
Mm-hmm.
that told me, and I was genuinely shocked. I couldn't believe you would hear rumors growing up about certain caves at certain beaches further along the coast. And I'm not going to name which town because it's not fair to the locals there,
I
but
think
you
it's
would hear rumors of, spiritual sacrifice and things like that.
yeah.
But what I've always discovered and what I've always come across, it's not to say that it's not always the case, but it's what I've come across and what I've read. It's very rarely, it's nearly always people in positions of power.
Right.
It's people with usually good jobs and positions of power that
Right.
tend to have, it's not what you would expect. I suppose you're expecting to see some sort of punk with all the tattoos and
Oh,
piercings, and
okay.
you think
No,
that's, so that's a cliche. It's not.
people.
It's very usually, it's like that Epstein case. You
Yeah.
don't recognize a monster just by looking at them.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. High society as
The
well.
old adage, you cannot judge a book by its cover. But
Yeah.
what that young fella. But the thing is, I mean, was he acting alone? Did he live in that house on his own?
he lived with his parents or his dad, and he acted alone. And he went out to the park and waited for 4 hours until these people were alone. I think. It's very
Yeah, I
accurate,
saw
and
that.
but so do you know the way synchronistically sometimes things, like especially media and things, kind of come across your path every so often at the same time, like the same theme, and you're like, oh, that's strange that I saw two programs about the same thing in the same day or week or whatever. Well, the second one was, and it was called "The Devil Made Me Do It," and it had a story from 1981. And it starts off with a murder of this man called Arnie Johnson. I have my notes here. Arnie Johnson, he stabs his landlord. And Arnie Johnson's actually in the documentary talking. Uh, and what happened was Arnie Johnson's defense was insanity because the devil made him do it. And there's this couple, and you may have come across them before, and they're called Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they're demonologists. And
Yes.
they were
Yeah.
involved in the Amityville horror case and various cases. They're old, they're probably dead now, but at this,
The Annabelle doll, yeah,
they're involved
a
in
lot
loads.
of films made, but
They're like prolific
yeah.
demonologist couple from America, and this is in 1981, and they got involved.
They also, sorry, they did work for like the FBI and for police services and things
Yeah,
like that as well.
okay.
But
Yeah.
they
I'm
were
gonna
acknowledged by the church and things like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into them more, but they were heavily involved
Yeah.
in this because they basically wanted to take the devil to court. Because this guy um, was possessed by the devil and he killed his landlord. Now, the reason why they were convinced that he was possessed by the devil was because Arnie Johnson's girlfriend's son was exorcised and Arnie was there, and there was a whole thing where Arnie was exposed to a child who was deemed to be possessed by the Catholic Church. And I don't think they were even Catholics. That's another thing. They were of another faith, like Christian denomination, but they weren't Catholic, but they got the Catholics in to deal with it. And this is in Connecticut. And basically, yeah, it all kind of, they go into the whole story, and the guy gets off. He goes to jail on a manslaughter charge, but it's fascinating. So the kid gets the
It's Dave. I've been reading up on the Warren cases and things that they've got involved in,
yeah.
and I mean, long before. I mean, now I think is the woman still alive, or has she died
I
since?
don't know. It's third. They look
She lived to quite a grand old age. The husband died before her,
right.
but
Okay.
they were like esteemed and established for a long time,
Hmm.
and have and provided a lot of proof down the years with recordings, photographs, experiences.
Yes,
They are quite well known for that. Like, so I mean, it's
they got themselves
yeah.
involved in this murder case, as
Mm.
I'm a lawyer and to defend the guy against the devil. So
I've said that before. There's been things that have happened and people that have done things, and well, actually, it wasn't so much about criminals, but it was like people that were deemed crazy and put in, in asylums
Mhm.
down the years. I mean, you don't know.
Oh, you don't know.
We know a lot more now, and the possibility of different sort of, whether it's, they can check whether there's a chemical imbalance, whether there's something
Yeah.
specifically wrong with your nature, and if there isn't, we have other options nowadays that we mightn't have had before.
So that
But I mean, I wonder how often that happened.
yeah, it's like quite a lot. This documentary talks to the cops that were involved. It talks to medical professionals. It has recordings of the 11-year-old kid talking in Latin and stuff. So I thought it was quite good. It was a discovery.
Scary stuff.
Scary stuff. Only
Yeah, and the fact it was serendipitous that it came out on television.
yeah, yeah.
I was just going to say it's serendipitous that it
But
came out
like
at the same time. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Your uncle in England did, we
Basically
did.
the same day I read that story, and I signed up to the Discovery Channel on demand or whatever, Discovery Plus, and it popped up. I was looking for something else and it popped up. So, um, interesting, dark, not for everyone, but
Very dark. But do you think, I mean, we're noticing and hearing more of this now because of the fact that people have been in lockdown for the last couple of years worldwide, not just here.
yeah,
And so anything that sort of stands out from the norm, we tend to notice it a wee bit more.
yeah. Do you remember we were saying, or do you remember that? Actually, he's in this documentary. Coincidentally, do you know that priest? He was in that interview that I sent you before, where it was just a guy interviewing the exorcist, some current guy today. Vincent Lampert, his name is Father Vincent Lampert. I was gonna say I'm not sure how much, like I do believe that he's an exorcist, but I feel weird about him because he is in everything. That's 3 things I've seen him in now. I'm like, he should be out doing.
Well, that doesn't. I watched. Yeah, I watched the one that you sent me, and what I found interesting about that, because if you go online, there's lots of American exorcists. There's, as you say, there's about 120 or something now. But in his, he's speaking when he first became an exorcist, there were only 16 worldwide.
Yeah, exactly. So
that struck a note with me because when I talked to the priest who was an exorcist back in the 80s, at that time there was only 23 worldwide.
Yeah.
And it seems now that, there are hundreds, but I don't think there are. I think it's only the ones appointed by the Vatican that are acknowledged by the church as being properly trained exorcists, as opposed to,
there are quite a
Sorry?
lot. I think there are quite a lot of Catholic exorcists compared to what there used to be.
Right, I have another story actually, and it was the lady I was talking to about that worked in Crolly Factory, but this is a family story. And it's the house that she lives in outside Donegal, and she believes it to be haunted. She inherited the house and she's living in what would have been originally her grandparents' family home. And she's had lots of experiences where, lights have gone on and off, doors open and close. She'll hear whispers. She'll hear, there's a barn up behind the house where she literally heard that much racket one night. She expected to come downstairs and see a mess. And there was nothing moved, nothing touched. There was another incident where one of her sheep had wandered up that was actually due to, have a lamb, had wandered off into the next field and got caught in bad weather. Whatever it was anyway, her clock fell off the wall at a certain time, and she'd heard the clatter at the barn, and she thought she just got up and went out and checked. Sure enough, it was like something was trying to take her attention to the fact that, you need to go out here now. But so there's 2 reasons you think that it might be someone haunting. The first one's quite a nice story. The second one's a bit scary. The first one was one uncle, and now this is at the time, this is back around 1918, 1919. So you still had the British occupation, and they occupied the Rosses Gweedore. Well, they occupied all of Ireland, but they were the Rosses Gweedore specifically. And her grandfather, her great-grandfather was a musician, as were the family. And he used to sit outside the house. His was quite near the main road. And if he heard or seen the Brits coming at a distance, he used to play a certain tune so that it would warn the ones that were up in the barn, whatever they were doing up in the barn. I don't know. I didn't ask. It would warn them that the Brits were coming, and they would leg it over the bog. They wouldn't get caught. Yeah. But there was one such occasion where the uncle, and I think it might have been one of the aunts, and I think there might have been an aunt already out in New York, whatever it was anyway, they're up at the barn, and the grandfather, their father's sitting outside, and he plays a certain tune, and they're like, right, that's it. They've grabbed their bags, they've legged it. They're literally on a boat down south to the Americas, the following day. And he was only 22, and they made it as far as New York. But on arrival in New York, I think it was after, Ellis Island and then into New York, he got influenza.
Oh no.
So it would have been the second or third wave that time.
Did they?
So it was around the Spanish flu time, but it must have been when they thought it was safe to travel. But I mean, they had to because they were doing a runner from the Brits that were based
Yeah.
in and around Burtonport and Dunlow.
Right.
And so he died on arrival. So it's very possible she thinks it's him because he never really, arrived. So she thinks it might be his spirit or his brother, who apparently was a drinker and a gambler and a bit of a blackguard.
Okay.
And they had a bit of a falling out with the mother, her great grandmother, and she put him out of the house. He was only now, this fella was only about 19 or 20,
Right.
and she put him out of the house anyway. And she says, "No, that's it. You're not coming back in." And he says, "You'll never put me out of this house for good, alive or dead." And away he went.
Mm.
And he was found murdered before morning. And they think it was
Really?
most likely the
That's
Brits that did it. But yeah, he was found murdered just outside Dunlow.
okay.
And they think it was most likely the Brits. But crimes like that against Irish people then
Right.
went unpunished. I mean, it's like, what are you going to do if it was the Brits? I mean, they
Yeah.
weren't investigating it, so I think they kind of knew it must have been British soldiers that had murdered him. But him being a bit of a blackguard and a carry on, so they took the body back down to the mother's house, and she says, I'm not wait. I only threw him out last night, and she felt all bad about the body. It's not coming in here, so they put the coffin out in the shed, and an hour later, the coffin fell through the floor of the shed. So the people there for the wake, they had to take the coffin in and sit him down in the house. And apparently the mother had said then, well, he said he wasn't leaving the house, alive or dead. It was such a strange thing to say, and then for him to be found murdered the following morning. So she thinks it's him because he more or less said the night before, the night he was killed,
Yeah.
you'll never keep me out of this house
That's
alive or
very
dead. So
weird.
she thinks it might be him.
Yeah. I like.
Yeah, she doesn't want to say anything because she doesn't mind him being there. She's kind of got used to him over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, lots and lots of activity around the house. As I say, but as a kind of yeah, it sort of takes you back to the fact that there were a lot of crimes like that. And we've said that before, hauntings of areas where people that were found murdered along the side of the road. You'd like to think it never happened here, but it did happen here. And it happened here not once or twice. There are different stories from as Glenties right down to Gidor to Dunlewy, Letterkenny. There are different, everyone has a different story about someone they knew that was murdered or found, and it was most, you don't know. You don't know. There were different times, and there were poorer times, and there were different times. But yeah, that was that story. I found it quite interesting. I'd love to say now where the house was, show it to you, but as I say, she's quite happy with her ghosty living with her. But it was just a sort of like, she obviously has some sort of spiritualistic powers, mediumistic powers, when she hears and sees ghosts.
If I buy a house in
I thought it was good stories. I thought.
It's a good story, yeah. If I buy a house in Donegal, I'm gonna need it. Get the priest or someone down or an exorcist to clear it because I don't want a new house. I want a scary old house. We'll see.
Yeah, just get your house blessed. It's kind of the thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say
Throw the priest a tenner, tell him to come down, bless the house. You'll give him a cake and a cup of tea.
yeah.
Listen, we'll bring this to an end tonight. I think we had a few good stories. I would like to come back with a little bit more about the Warrens maybe next week.
Yeah.
And I see now our friend Brian Weaver in the States covered a couple of things that they did.
Okay.
So we can use his book as a reference and come back with a couple of more of those stories and see what else we hear about that guy in the news this week. Let's hope it's a kind of a one-off.
Very quickly, I'll see. There's an article here that is saying he was found guilty of murder, which is kind of obvious. But I wonder if it doesn't say how long he wouldn't have been sentenced if he was only found guilty today. So
he was doing it apparently to win the lottery.
He had a list of things, a list of wishes. Sorry, I never said that. Yeah. One of them was to win the lottery. One was to not get caught. And that didn't work. So okie dokie. So let's wrap it up. And We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. It's summertime. We're well, brief times. We'll have plenty of time to talk come the winter. There'll be lots of longer sessions, but we're going to keep our stories brief for the summer anyway, so as not to lose not for you to lose interest. Listen, good night from Donegal, and Ben. Look forward to catching up again, definitely. And good night from Dublin.
See you later. Bye.